Isn't it strange how life can feel completely perfect, only to unravel in an instant? My name's Lincoln Everett, but everyone just calls me Link. I thought I had everything I could want: a thriving career, a beautiful wife, and friends I could rely on. But it's shocking how one night can completely flip your world upside down. The night that changed everything, I was hosting a major corporate party to celebrate landing a new client. I poured everything into this event, investing months of planning and making sure every detail was flawless. My wife, Felicia, was by my side, looking as radiant as ever. She's always been the type to light up a room, instantly becoming the center of attention. I loved that about her, at least I used to. Our closest friends were there too, including Casper, my best friend since college, and his wife Nora. We'd been close for years, spending countless weekends together, going on vacations, double dates, the whole thing. I always thought of Casper as a brother, someone I could trust with my life. Little did I know just how wrong I was. The party was in full swing, with drinks flowing, laughter filling the air, and everything appearing perfect. But something felt off, a strange sensation gnawing at me every time I looked at Felicia. She seemed to laugh a little too hard or lean a little too close to Casper. At first I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was my imagination, or just the stress of the event, or maybe even the bourbon I'd been drinking all night. But then I started noticing small things that made my skin crawl, those lingering glances between them that just didn't sit right. I kept trying to convince myself that I was imagining things, but deep down, something didn't add up. "Link, man, you all right?" Jasper, a close friend who's also a psychologist, asked as he clapped me on the shoulder. I must have looked troubled as he gave me that look, trying to read my mind. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, just a lot on my plate," trying to brush it off. But Jasper wasn't buying it. He gave me that familiar look he used when he was trying to get someone to open up. But I wasn't ready to talk, not yet. As the night wore on, I needed a break. I stepped out onto the balcony to take a client call. The cold air hit my face, and for a moment I just stood there, taking everything in. But when I turned around to head back inside, that's when I saw them, Casper and Felicia, standing in the shadows just beyond the glass door. The way she touched his arm, the way they leaned into each other, it was like they were in their own world. My stomach dropped. For a moment I thought I must be seeing things, but no, it was real. Casper was whispering something in her ear, and she was smiling in that way she used to smile at me. I felt sick. Rage bubbled up, but I forced myself to stay calm. I turned and walked away, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. Inside, the party felt like a blur. I was shaking hands, nodding at conversations without really hearing them. Later, Felicia found me, acting as if nothing was wrong. I tried to play it cool, but on the ride home I couldn't keep it in any longer. "You seemed close with Casper tonight," I said, trying to sound casual, though my heart was pounding. Felicia barely looked at me, her eyes glued to her phone. "Oh, don't start with your insecurities, Link," she snapped, exasperated. "Can we not do this right now?" And that was it. She shut me down, just like that. I'd always known Felicia could be cold, but this was different. Something between us had changed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. But at that moment I didn't have the energy to push her. The days that followed were pure hell. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But every time Felicia's phone buzzed and she stepped out of the room to take a call, a knot tightened in my stomach. She started working late more often, claiming her meetings went into the night. I wanted to believe her, but my gut instincts told me otherwise. I called Jasper a few days later, needing someone to confide in. I told him about what I saw on the balcony. He listened, quiet at first, then let out a long sigh. "Link, I'm not saying you should jump to conclusions," he said carefully, "but if you're feeling like this, maybe it's time to dig a little deeper. Gather some clarity before you confront her." "Clarity?" I laughed bitterly. "What am I supposed to do, hire a private investigator or something?" Jasper was silent for a moment. "I mean, if that's what it takes to get the truth." I tried to laugh it off, but his words stuck with me. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention. I noticed Felicia's phone was always face down, and she'd get texts that made her smile, only to go silent when I entered the room. I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous, that I was turning into one of those paranoid husbands who sees infidelity everywhere. But a voice in my head kept insisting, "You're not crazy, something's going on." I wasn't ready to confront her yet, but I knew one thing: if Felicia was hiding something, I was going to find out. And if it turned out I was wrong, I was ready to admit it. But deep down I knew. I just knew something was happening. You know that feeling you can't shake, the one that sits like a pit in your stomach. That's how it was for me after that party. Every time Felicia's phone buzzed, or she left the house with a vague excuse, my mind went back to that moment on the balcony with Casper. It gnawed at me until I couldn't focus on anything else. I tried to let it go, to tell myself I was overreacting, but the doubt had already taken root. I couldn't stop wondering what she was really doing when she said she had late-night meetings or client dinners. That's when I decided to stop being the clueless husband. I needed answers, real answers, not just vague reassurances or evasive replies from Felicia. So one evening, after she'd gone to bed, I took her phone, praying she hadn't set a new passcode. Luckily, she hadn't. My hands were shaking as I installed tracking software on her phone. I kept telling myself I wasn't crazy, I just needed proof, one way or another. The next few days were torture. I acted like everything was fine, putting on a smile while my insides churned. I kept checking the software logs, reading every message and tracking her location. It didn't take long before my worst suspicions were confirmed. The app revealed that Felicia was meeting Casper at a hotel repeatedly, each time disguised as a business meeting. The messages between them left no room for doubt, filled with words like "I miss you" and "I can't wait to see you again." Each message felt like a knife twisting deeper, and I reached a point where I needed more than just texts. I wanted undeniable proof. That's when I hired Max Haynes, a private investigator Jasper had recommended. Max was a straightforward guy, one who didn't pry but got right to work. He immediately began following Felicia and Casper, and within a week he returned with photos, clear, unmistakable evidence of their secret encounters. My wife and my best friend were entwined like a couple of love-struck teenagers. I stared at those images for hours, rage boiling within me as I pondered my next steps. An outburst wouldn't be enough if I was going to confront them. I needed to do it in a way that would hit just as hard as they had hurt me. In the midst of this, Chloe, my assistant, started noticing the changes in me. "Link, are you all right?" she asked one afternoon, genuine concern in her eyes. Chloe had always been a little too friendly, constantly finding reasons to be around, but this time her concern seemed deeper than casual politeness. "You've seemed distracted lately. Is everything okay?" Part of me wanted to tell her to mind her business, but something held me back. Maybe it was the loneliness or my need for an ally. So I opened up a little, sharing that I was dealing with personal matters. She listened, her hand lingering on my shoulder a moment longer than needed. "If you ever need to talk." "Or anything else," she murmured, her voice soft, almost inviting. I knew what she was implying, but I wasn't interested, not yet. I had more pressing issues to handle, and I wasn't about to create new problems while still trapped in this one. Then a strange text arrived on my phone. "You don't know the half of it," it read. I had no idea who was behind these messages, but they seemed to know everything, dropping hints about Felicia and Casper. Initially, I wondered if Chloe might be fishing for more details. Then it struck me, could it be Nora? Maybe she, too, was beginning to suspect her husband. To test this theory, I invited Casper out for lunch. He arrived, all smiles, but I sensed a hidden tension. I went straight for the truth. "Casper, I know about you and Felicia," I said, my voice calm as I locked eyes with him. For a moment I saw panic flash across his face, but he quickly masked it. "You're crazy," Linky laughed, shaking his head. "You've always been paranoid. Felicia and I are just friends," I shot back. "Friends don't meet in hotels behind their spouses' backs." He turned pale, but held his ground, insisting I was overreacting. I knew he was lying, but I needed more to truly expose him. I returned to Jasper, seething. "He's lying, Jasper, I know it. But I don't have enough to destroy him yet." Jasper leaned back, his expression thoughtful as ever. "If you want to catch them, you need to be patient. Gather everything so when you strike, it's decisive." That's when an idea hit me. I could use Nora. If she was already suspicious, maybe I could push her to the edge. I invited her to lunch, presenting it as a discussion over a business opportunity. It didn't take long for the conversation to veer. "Nora, can I be honest with you?" I asked, watching her reaction closely. "I think there's something going on between Felicia and Casper." Her expression darkened, and after a pause she nodded. "I've had my suspicions," she admitted, "but I never had proof." We decided to team up. She'd monitor Casper, while I kept tabs on Felicia. Together we'd uncover the full truth. At the same time, I began leaning more on Chloe. She was eager to help, more than willing to be involved in my plan. I can handle the tech stuff, she offered, her eyes glinting with excitement. She was skilled at digging into things, soon gaining access to Felicia's emails, schedule, and tracking her whereabouts. I knew if I was going to expose them, I'd need every bit of ammunition. With Nora on one side and Chloe on the other, I felt ready to bring down Felicia and Casper's hidden life. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike. But the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just about Felicia's betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming control, ensuring they regretted every second they spent together behind my back. And if I had to burn everything down to achieve that, so be it. One day, as I was combing through our closet, I stumbled upon Felicia's old laptop, buried under a pile of old belongings. To her, it was probably just an outdated piece of technology, forgotten and gathering dust. But to me, it was a possible gateway to the truth I craved. I took it to my office, shut the door, and powered it on. Surprisingly, it wasn't even password protected. That was so typical of Felicia, always careless, assuming no one would ever question her. I dove straight into her emails, initially expecting a few flirtatious exchanges. But what I found was far worse. Felicia and Casper's correspondence stretched back years over 2 years. My heart raced as I read one email after another, each message more painful than the last. She poured her feelings out to him, confiding that she felt trapped in our marriage, claiming he made her feel alive again. I couldn't look away from the screen, my stomach churning as I read how Felicia described me as some controlling, lifeless husband who drained her joy. She wrote things like, "I can't breathe around him, Casper, but with you I feel free." The worst part was Casper's response. He assured her he'd always be there for her, telling her she deserved better. It was sickening. I needed something to numb the rage boiling within me. Instead of reaching for whiskey, I picked up the phone and called Nora. She deserved to see this if I was going to bring them down. I wasn't doing it alone. Nora arrived that evening, her eyes rimmed with red, likely from sleepless nights. I skipped the pleasantries and pushed the laptop toward her. As she scrolled through the emails, the color drained from her face. 2 years, she whispered, her voice breaking. How could they do this to us? I watched her crumble, but I couldn't afford sympathy. I needed her fury, her drive. We can destroy them, Nora, I said, my voice low and steady. But we need to be smart about it. She wiped her tears, nodding, I'm in. Let's ruin them. From that moment, Nora became my closest ally. We were bound by betrayal, ready to do whatever it took to make them pay. Max Haynes was already on my payroll, but I intensified his work, telling him to find everything: bank records, hidden accounts, any ammunition we could use to bring them down. Amidst the chaos, I found myself spending more time with Nora. It began innocently enough, with late-night strategy sessions and shared drinks after days of plotting. But soon, the lines started to blur. We were 2 wounded souls, tending to each other's scars, and it was only a matter of time before things escalated. One night, after too many glasses of wine, Nora leaned in, and before I realized it, we were kissing a beautiful, chaotic mess. For a moment I wondered if I was any better than Felicia. But then I recalled those emails, the lies, the betrayal. This wasn't about love or lust, it was about power, control, and revenge. Nora knew it too. We weren't lovers, we were partners in a twisted game. Even as things intensified with Nora, I couldn't ignore Chloe. She was relentless, inserting herself into my life under the guise of support. I sensed she wanted more than to just be my assistant, and I was beginning to see her potential. Chloe was ambitious, resourceful, and willing to go where I hesitated. When she found a way to hack into Felicia's social media, it felt like Christmas morning. "Link, you won't believe what I found," she told me one evening, her eyes alight with excitement. Felicia's been skimming money from her clients. Small amounts, but over the years it's added up. This could ruin her career. I had to hand it to her. Chloe was ruthless, the perfect accomplice, unclouded by emotions. "Leak it," I instructed, "but make sure it can't be traced to us." Chloe grinned, clearly thrilled to play a part in the destruction. Done. Then came the grand finale. I organized a charity event, the ideal setting to humiliate Felicia and Casper in front of everyone who mattered. I ensured they'd both be there, presenting it as just another event hosted by my agency. Felicia was all smiles, unaware that her world was about to crumble. On the night of the event, I made sure everything was in place. The guests were mingling, champagne was flowing, and Felicia was basking in the spotlight, completely oblivious. Casper was there too, acting as if nothing was wrong, like he hadn't spent 2 years betraying me with my wife. I waited until the room was at its fullest before making my move. The projector screen lit up, and at first everyone assumed it was part of the evening's entertainment. But then the messages appeared, text after text, photo after photo, all laid bare for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room as the truth sank in. Felicia's face went pale, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape. Casper looked like he'd seen a ghost. Nora played her part flawlessly, storming out in tears, making sure everyone knew what a cheating bastard Casper was. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, Nora had filed for divorce, her lawyer armed with everything we'd gathered. Casper was ruined, and as for Felicia, she was left with nothing. I started my own divorce proceedings that night, ensuring she wouldn't walk away with a penny. It was over, or at least it should have been. But as I stood there watching Felicia's life implode, the satisfaction I expected didn't come. Instead, there was an emptiness, a hollow realization that perhaps I'd destroyed a part of myself along the way. I left the party early that night. Nora wanted to talk, to see if there was something real between us, but I couldn't face it. As I drove away, Chloe texted me we did it, but the victory felt hollow, the taste of revenge bitter. Despite everything, I felt like I'd lost far more than I'd gained, but none of that mattered now. I was all in. There was no turning back. I'd burned everything down, and all that remained was ash. The aftermath of the charity event was even more intense than I'd anticipated. Felicia and Casper had been blindsided by the public exposure of their affair. The scandal sent shockwaves through our social circles, turning them into pariahs overnight. Friends who once adored Felicia and admired Casper's business sense now rushed to distance themselves. Yet, instead of crumbling under the humiliation, they seemed to grow closer, clinging to each other in a twisted display of unity. Casper, always the charmer, started spinning a new narrative, claiming they were victims of my unhinged campaign of revenge. Watching them try to salvage their reputations only reignited my fury. I couldn't bear the thought of them twisting the story, painting themselves as the wronged parties. Then, Amanda Tate entered the scene, a well-known journalist famous for uncovering high-profile scandals. She reached out saying she wanted to hear my side of the story. I was hesitant at first. Amanda was relentless, the type of journalist who would dig until every last secret was exposed. But I thought that if I could control the narrative, I could cause further damage to Casper and Felicia. We met in a secluded cafe, away from prying eyes. Amanda was sharp, her questions cutting right to the heart of the matter. "Lincoln," she began, her gaze intense, "you've gone to great lengths to expose their affair. But why keep pushing? Isn't it enough that everyone now knows the truth?" She narrowed her eyes, studying me closely. I leaned back, choosing my words carefully. "People like Felicia and Casper think they can ruin others' lives without any repercussions," I replied. "I just wanted them to feel what it's like to lose everything." Amanda seemed interested, but I sensed she wasn't buying the whole story. She was digging, hoping to find a weakness to exploit. I knew I had to stay cautious. One wrong move, and she'd turn her focus onto me. While Amanda busied herself trying to understand my motives, I decided to strike Casper where it would hurt most: his finances. Using my contacts, I spread rumors about financial trouble at his sports club. Peter Connolly, his business partner, started to panic as the whispers intensified, and soon investors began pulling out, leaving Casper scrambling to keep his business afloat. But as my revenge unfolded, things with Nora began to fall apart. The divorce process was wearing her down, the stress taking a toll. She was once fully on board with dismantling Casper and Felicia, but I could see her starting to crack. She drank more, her mood swings grew erratic. One evening I went to check on her and she was a mess. "Link, what have we become?" she slurred, eyes bloodshot. I thought this would make us feel better, but I just feel hollow. I tried to comfort her, but truthfully, I was growing weary of her emotional baggage. This was supposed to be about revenge, not handling Nora's breakdowns, but I couldn't cut her loose, not yet, while she was still a valuable ally. That's when Chloe made her move. She'd been quietly observing, waiting for her chance. With Nora falling apart, Chloe stepped in to fill the gap. She was ambitious, sharp, and ruthless, exactly what I needed in this fight. She saw right through me, understanding I wasn't simply aiming to expose Felicia, I was out for blood. "Link, we've done enough damage to Casper," Chloe said one night in my office, her eyes flashing with that same hunger. "But Felicia's still standing. I found something that could ruin her. Completely intrigued yet cautious, I asked, "What did you find?" Chloe smirked. "Felicia's been stealing from her clients, overcharging them and pocketing the difference. We could use this to destroy her reputation, maybe even take her to court." My initial instinct was to hesitate. Sure, I wanted to bring Felicia down, but I was starting to question how far I was willing to go. Sensing my reluctance, Chloe leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a low, persuasive tone. "After everything she did to you, are you really going to let her rebuild her life? She tore you apart. Now it's your turn to finish what you started." She was right. Felicia had betrayed and humiliated me. I couldn't stop now, not when I was so close. "Let's do it," I agreed, my voice cold and resolute. "Leak whatever you found. Make sure it's untraceable." Chloe's eyes lit up with triumph. She was eager to get her hands dirty, and truthfully, I needed someone like her. With Max Haynes back on the case, we dug deeper into Felicia's financial records. What we found was even worse than I'd anticipated. Felicia was knee-deep in fraud, her entire business built on lies and theft. The evidence was overwhelming, enough to completely destroy her. But as Chloe and I compiled everything, a strange emptiness began to creep over me. I'd been so consumed with destroying them that I hadn't stopped to consider what this was doing to me. Yet there was no turning back now. Chloe was relentless, feeding off my anger and pushing me to go further. And maybe she was right. Maybe the only way to find peace was to burn everything to the ground. In the end, this wasn't only about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring Felicia and Casper never found a moment's happiness again. I was prepared to strip them of everything they held dear, even if it meant losing the last of my own humanity. By this point, my life had devolved into an endless cycle of plotting and executing revenge. It was like an addiction. Each blow I landed against Felicia and Casper brought a rush, a sense of control that I desperately needed. But as my focus narrowed on them, the rest of my life started to crumble. I barely slept, spending every night poring over emails and financial documents, searching for any advantage to bring them down completely. I was convinced that only their complete destruction could bring me closure. My business, however, was suffering. David Miller, my business partner, wasn't shy about pointing that out. "Link, we're losing clients," he said one morning, frustration evident in his voice. "Your head's not in the game anymore. Evelyn Marsh is ready to pull her account, unless you prove you're committed." Evelyn Marsh was one of our largest clients, a high-profile fashion mogul whose account was worth millions. But I couldn't bring myself to care. All I could think about was Felicia and Casper, how they were twisting the narrative. "I'll handle it," I told David dismissively, brushing him off. But he didn't look convinced, and frankly, neither was I. My obsession had spiraled out of control. I was so lost in this twisted vendetta that I didn't even notice the other fires around me until they were nearly beyond saving. That's when Detective Marcus Reynolds entered the scene. In the middle of another sleepless night, my phone rang. "Mr. Everett, this is Detective Reynolds. We need to talk," a stern voice said on the other end, wasting no time. "Felicia has filed a harassment complaint against you. She claims you've been stalking her." For a moment, I was speechless. Felicia was playing the victim yet again. I could almost picture her smug grin as she signed the complaint. I spat into the phone, but Reynolds cut me off. "Evidence or stalking, Mr. Everett? Be careful. If you cross a line, I'll make sure you face the consequences." When the call ended, I slammed my fist against the wall. Felicia was trying to turn the tables, and the worst part was, it was working. But I wasn't finished yet. If she thought a police report would slow me down, she clearly didn't understand who she was dealing with. Meanwhile, Chloe continued pushing herself deeper into my life. She was relentless, always whispering strategies on how we could utterly destroy Felicia and Casper, but now she was hinting at something more. "Link, we're great together," she murmured one night as we pored over yet another stack of Felicia's embezzlement records. We could take this partnership beyond just revenge. I knew exactly what she meant. I could sense it in the way she leaned in closer, her hand lingering on my shoulder. But I wasn't prepared to go there, not with Chloe, and especially not with Nora's presence still casting a shadow. Chloe was convenient, ruthless and dangerous, but deep down, I knew letting her in any further would be a mistake. While I tried to figure out my boundaries with Chloe, Nora was slipping away. She had begun drinking heavily, and her resentment was growing more visible. I didn't grasp the extent of it until one day she arrived at my place, her eyes wild and bloodshot. I went to see Felicia, she blurted, unsteady on her feet. My stomach dropped. You did what I asked, horrified. I needed answers, Link, she cried. I wanted to know why she did it, why she chose Casper. And then she told me that Felicia had turned her against me, claiming I was just using her, making her nothing but a pawn in my twisted game. Always the manipulator, Felicia had played her cards perfectly, poisoning Nora against me. Nora's face was flushed with anger and betrayal. You're no better than they are, she spat. All you care about is tearing them down, and you're dragging me with you. I'm done, Link. If you don't end this, I'll go to the police myself. At that moment, I knew I'd pushed Nora too far. She was unstable now, and if she went to Detective Reynolds, it would all be over. I tried to calm her, reminding her of the pain that Casper and Felicia had inflicted on us, but it was too late. Nora had made up her mind. As if that wasn't enough, I soon began receiving tips that someone was investigating my past. Anonymous emails started appearing, cryptic messages suggesting that my own secrets were on the brink of exposure. At first I suspected Nora was behind it, trying to sabotage me, but it could just as easily have been Casper or even Felicia, now that they knew I was the source of their financial ruin. Desperate, I turned to Chloe. We need to act first, she urged. Amanda Tate's circling like a vulture, waiting for more dirt on Felicia. Let's feed her a story that will bury them for good, I agreed, but only under one condition: make sure it's flawless, Chloe. If we're going to do this, it needs to be airtight. I met with Amanda again, offering her an exclusive scoop. You want the whole story? Well, I've got something that'll blow it wide open, I told her, sliding over a file of evidence we'd gathered against Felicia. But Amanda wasn't content with just the financial crimes. She leaned in, her gaze sharp and probing. Why go to such lengths? What did they do to you that's so unforgivable? She was digging, trying to uncover the cracks in my armor. I kept my answers vague, attempting to shift her focus back to Felicia and Casper, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting dangerously close to something deeper. I could see her mind working, piecing together fragments of my life I'd tried so hard to keep hidden. As I prepared to release the final wave of evidence against Felicia, another anonymous message arrived. This time it was blunt: be careful, Everett. The past has a way of catching up. Paranoia gripped me tightly. Someone was watching, waiting for me to slip. Now I was trapped. Nora was a ticking time bomb, Chloe was growing more ambitious than was wise, and Amanda was circling, ready to expose not only Felicia but me as well. With Casper and Felicia also plotting their own counterattack, it felt like the walls were closing in. But I couldn't quit now. I was too far gone. If I was going down, I intended to take them all with me. Everything was set. I was one step away from ending this twisted game. The last set of evidence against Felicia was ready to go: emails, bank statements, proof of her fraud. This was meant to be the final nail in the coffin. But just as I was about to release it, my world collapsed. An email from an unknown sender landed in my inbox, containing a series of messages between Chloe and Casper. At first I thought it was some kind of sick joke. But as I read on, the sickening truth hit me. Chloe, my most trusted ally, had been playing both sides all along. She had been feeding Casper details about my plans in exchange for a hefty payout, securing her own future once everything exploded. The rage was instant, like white-hot fire blazing through my veins. I stormed into my office, where Chloe was calmly working at her desk, completely unfazed. You didn't think I'd find out, I hissed, throwing the printed emails onto her desk. Chloe didn't even blink. She simply looked up at me with that same cool, confident smile. "Oh, Link, did you really think you could trust me?" she laughed. "I was never in this for you. I was in it for me. You were just a tool to get what I wanted." I wanted to strangle her right then, but all I could do was clench my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. "You're done here," I growled, barely containing my fury. "Pack your things and get out." But Chloe had already prepared her exit strategy. As I watched her leave, my phone began buzzing incessantly: news alerts, emails from clients, messages from David Miller. It was chaos. Chloe had leaked confidential information about my company to the press. Damaging rumors about my agency's finances were spreading like wildfire, and Evelyn Marsh, my most important client, was withdrawing. "Link, what the hell is going on?" David's voice was frantic over the phone. "We're bleeding clients. I can't keep doing this." And just like that, David, my last remaining ally, severed ties with me. My company was crumbling before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But it didn't end there. Nora's betrayal became the final blow. I should have known better than to trust her, especially after how I'd used her. Detective Marcus Reynolds called me in for questioning. "We have evidence that you've been using illegal surveillance software to monitor your wife," he stated, his gaze fixed on mine. I tried to deny it, but they had everything: digital trails, anonymous tips, and Nora's testimony. I was staring down potential charges and the walls were closing in fast. While I was under investigation, Felicia and Casper hit me with a lawsuit for defamation, accusing me of an obsessive crusade that had caused lasting damage to their reputations and businesses. My lawyers recommended settling out of court, but the costs would wipe out what little money I had left. Then came Amanda Tate's final strike. The article she published was a masterpiece of character assassination, detailing every sordid aspect of my descent into madness, my fixation on revenge, my manipulative schemes, and the wake of destruction I'd left behind. The public devoured it, and almost instantly I was a social outcast, plastered across tabloid headlines and turned into a meme on social media. I was ruined. With my business in tatters, Nora and Chloe vanished with Chloe's payout, leaving me utterly alone. I spent my days wandering through the empty house Felicia, and I had once shared, every room now a painful reminder of what I had lost. I tried calling Nora, but she had blocked my number and cut all ties. Even Max Haynes, the private investigator I'd relied on, had distanced himself, yet one evening he appeared without warning. "Link," he said, his voice edged with something that sounded almost like pity. "I've seen a lot of guys get swallowed by revenge, but you took it to a new level. Was it worth it? You've lost everything." I had no answer. I just stared at the empty whiskey bottle in my hands, wondering how I had ended up here. Max left, shaking his head, and I was left alone again, surrounded by nothing but the echoes of my own regrets. Then, one late night, I got an email from an anonymous sender. The subject line simply read, "A happy ending." After all, my hands trembled as I clicked it open. Inside was a single photo of Felicia and Casper, smiling on a sun-drenched beach, looking as happy as ever. Beneath the image was a single line in the end. Was it worth it? I stared at that message for what felt like hours, each word searing into my mind. I had torn my life apart trying to destroy them, but somehow they had moved on. Meanwhile, I was left with only the ruins of a life I had set ablaze. I wanted to reply, to scream, to smash my laptop against the wall. But all I could do was laugh, softly at first, then louder, until the hollow sound filled the empty house. It was a bitter, empty laugh, the kind that comes from a man with nothing left to lose. In the end, I had won nothing, no closure, no satisfaction, just the cold, brutal truth that I had become the very thing I despised, with no one left to blame but myself.